Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thanks again for joining me here. I hope you're having a phenomenal weekend. We're going to take a look at some lower time frame divergences here, or just more importantly, areas we want to pay attention to with our London low and our Asian high. We're also going to talk about our 4-hour convergence here, essentially where we're squeezing between some moving averages there, shifting that momentum, but the macro structure is still mostly intact, minus some larger time moving averages. So we're going to pay attention to all those things here today, and obviously double check some back-end liquidation data on specific altcoins that you tend to favor, and I do too, because they're just kind of easier to trade based on specific outliers that we like to look for. So we'll pay attention to that as well. Make sure you stick around. Let's take a closer look. All right, folks, before we jump into the back-end data, just a friendly reminder to please hit that like button, maybe even comment below. Deeply appreciate you doing that. Really helps grow the channel, and you did a great job yesterday. Keep up the good work, and I'll do the same. Now, what we're going to do here is just quickly touch on lower time frame, not divergences, but basically just if you can see here on the charts, 80,000.6, basically 80,600 is essentially that previous range high, right? So it's often common for those levels to get swept before the price turns around. This being a weekend, it would make perfect sense to see 80.6 to 81K because there's a lot of liquidation above the price in that range, right? So I did post that. Actually, let's find it here on social media, a little bit easier to identify. We can see some late shorts essentially between 81 and 83,000, but more specifically, when we do look at the, it's the 48-hour time frame here, there's a big chunk between basically 80.6 and 81,000. So that's probably likely to get hit here just a moment. Obviously something we want to pay attention to. So that is a present. That's definitely there. We also want to understand here that delta spot is a little bit higher than the other way around, right? It's not in the red, it's in the green. Basically just telling us that we have more money effectively flowing into spot in the last 24 hours. That usually shows some sustainability in the $80,000 range. So I think it's going to be a little bit of effort on Bitcoin's behalf, or maybe the market maker's behalf, to push the price action lower. It basically just tells us that there's more interest in this range here than ever before. So when we look at, let's find the right chart here. We saw a pretty big buy here, buy order. This is a 10 million plus buy order at that $80,500 mark. Now, if you saw my post from earlier, you'll know why that is, because it was this guy right here. Take a look. This is that big sell order there, essentially at 80.5K. So that just got filled. That's why we see a large buy order, essentially, when you're selling, you're buying, right? So in that concept here, that gives us the indication that we're in pretty good shape here to probably see a slightly larger upside. And what I mean by larger is just 80.6 to 81,000. It's a very logical area to kind of assume will happen, right? Just based on the way things are moving. But when we look at the lower timeframes here, 4-hour time frame, we do have a bit of an overextension. This isn't massive. Honestly, you can probably see it a little bit better on the lower time frames. So we hit a 9 on TD sequential here, and now we're kind of pushing sideways and just broke through that local barrier. Okay, so that local resistance here is something to kind of pay close attention to. If we can hold above this 80.5K, 80.4K range today, then there's a good chance that we might actually continue a bit higher. Once more, I'm expecting just a quick sweep of this $81,000 range to hit that Asia high range and then back down. But let's go ahead and double check, see if there's anything else kind of telling anything else there. When we look at open interest, we want to recognize that open interest is at 23%. That's basically lower than it was yesterday. So this does tell us that whales are not super active right now, which does give me some apprehension and wanting to take along because, obviously it's a weekend, whales are generally inactive, but for the most part, it's dissipating, it's pulling back. It was the same thing yesterday too, it was pretty low overall. And then true retail longs are increasing, right? Or at least they were from the day before. So when we have a large percentile, a large delta for true retail longs, that tells us that the price right now is probably moving based on more retail versus, versus whales, right? So with these lower positions kind of taking control, it's just a matter of time before the whales will recognize that. In fact, we can see that reflected here with our whale versus retail. We can see retail is pretty much just very heavy in this range here ever since we entered in the 80K range, right? So whales are just kind of letting people accumulate at 80,000. Generally speaking, they become more active and they'll probably push the price action down. That's kind of my guess. We're also in a support range, keep in mind, 79 to 81,000, kind of just that generic range that we're probably going to be within for a short while here until the price breaks above or below. That's why I'm expecting 81,000 to hold as a resistance, because that was a previous range low. Hasn't been tested really much as a new range high. Okay, so 81,000 open interest, heavy there. That tells me we're in pretty good shape to see 81K, probably the local resistance. Furthermore, liquidation delta is at break even. This tells us we're in a transition. Generally speaking, when this hits zero, the price could go either direction. But for the most part, we derived from the upside. We have selling pressure into this support range. If the support doesn't hold, obviously we go lower. But generally speaking, that's one of those areas we want to kind of pay attention to. That in combination with liquidation being very high to the downside, between 77 and 79K, that is a pretty telling indication there. Now, I know I sent out a 3-day time frame post earlier today asking if 81 to 83,000 would be hit. Do you think that's going to happen? Truth is, that's a lower time frame. This is a little bit more on the macro. This is a full week's worth of liquidation. For the most part, we see these trends happen, multiple days in a row, 5 to 7 days often. So with us just pulling back, we're only about 2 or 3 days into this continuation lower. I think we got one more leg down before the price bottoms out in the 77, maybe 78K range. Okay, so that's kind of my consideration there for a long versus short on Bitcoin. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What are you thinking? I mean, honestly, this ascending trend still gives me pause to want to short based on the fact that we're still creating higher highs and higher lows, right? Till that significantly shifts, we want to presume it's going to continue. But we do want to also understand this has been moving for almost a full, month and a half now, right? So ever since, May 29th or something, we hit our bottom. Sorry, March 29th, we hit the bottom, and the price pushed all the way up there. We got to see some kind of recourse, some kind of retracement between now and then. Either way, it's not like it's a guarantee per se, but it is certainly a larger statistical favorability. We continue lower just based on the way the market's moving right now. Okay, so those are my thoughts. Again, what are yours? Why don't you comment below? Love to hear it. Let's take a look at some altcoins next. All right, folks, quick look here at Ethereum. I'm just going to go ahead and start with a side-by-side comparison with Bitcoin and just kind of recognizing the correlation and dissimilarities there. In other words, Bitcoin is essentially creating higher lows in a lot of ways here. Looks like it wants to continue higher, with Ethereum pushing up really hard and then kind of going sideways. Now, Alt's got a pretty big pump yesterday, so that is part of it there, but the fact that it hasn't broken out or continued higher gives me pause to want to take a long. Keep in mind, though, this is looking pretty solid in this the bullish rectangle type of pattern we're seeing here. If Bitcoin pushes towards 81,000, which is expected, I think a little bit more of a pump here for ETH is also expected. So just be mindful that very much could be the case. When we look at open interest, though, there's a lot of resistance at the 2350 range. Keep in mind, I've traded that range before. We actually shorted at 2350 or just a little bit above that. So this is one of those areas that's contested. In other words, we have a lot of open interest there. There's also a heavy amount of liquidation delta to the downside, basically telling us that shorts are in control, right? So you generally don't want to try to take a long against that, but the truth is if that stays overextended for too much longer, we could actually see a short squeeze. Furthermore, too, we look at liquidation. There's still more left to the downside. 2250 is still kind of my target range in my mind of where ETH should go. That's under the impression Bitcoin's hits 77 to 78K though, right? If Bitcoin doesn't essentially break below 80,000, then we're probably not going to see that. So just kind of be mindful of that. We look at the charts here too. Just kind of clarify, we got our point of control right now at this point. So a lot of things are kind of squeezing and compressing here. There's reasons why we're seeing consolidation here. But short-term upside makes more sense with Bitcoin, probably likely to move up a little bit higher. And then the inverse as well, of course, Bitcoin drops its bottom. I think ETH will run. It'll run to 2250 to test that lower range support, kind of that area we've seen the most amount of volume. Okay, so that's kind of my thoughts there. What are yours? Comment below. Quick heads up to our traders. We got a 15% discount on trading fees if you use my link to register through Bitunix. Links down below in the description. All right, folks, quick look at Solana, just double checking some important stuff. It's going to sound like I'm bearish, but I'm really not on Solana. It's mostly just a simple fact that there's CME gaps below the price. Two of them effectively. We got 92.30 is essentially the current price for the closure on CME futures, which basically puts us at a pullback here to fill that level. But furthermore, too, there's also another gap between 90 and 91.25. That's when there was a break yesterday, of course, because I don't know if you know, but CME futures does have a break in the afternoons, and the price gapped up in between there. So we got two gaps. And on top of that, we've also got a fair value gap here, pretty substantial amount there. We're also seeing a double overextension here, where we had a 9 on TDS and we're soon to hit another 9. So the likelihood of continuation higher is lower based on the statistical fact of the matter is here, we've been pushing up with little retracement, and it has to pull back at some point. So the logical conclusion is to retest our previous range high, right? We got $90 here as that significant area of retracement. So the likelihood of seeing 90 is quite high. Once again, that's based on the premise that Bitcoin pulls back, okay? Bitcoin doesn't pull back, then you shouldn't expect that from Solana. Same thing here as well. We look at the side by side; it's obviously outperforming versus Bitcoin. So if you're considering a short with this coin, just recognize that there's an inherent risk, right? Keep your stop losses tight. In fact, we have a short position open pretty much right in this range here, and the concept is to just have a quick scalp to the downside and a tight stop loss just in case the price moves and runs, because it could happen, right? So that's kind of the case there. Look at this here, this difference between Ethereum and Solana, significant liquidation delta, basically letting us know that bulls are in control and for the most part unwilling to let go of that profit. But the longer we stay in this range here at 92, the more likely we are to go down to hit those CME gaps. There's also pretty much no more liquidation on the upside, minus just a really quick late short. Maybe that might even be me right there, right? So for the most part, at this point, I think further downside makes perfect sense. What are your thoughts? Why don't you comment below? Let me know. All right, folks, quick look here at SUI, just quickly understanding the obvious pump and potential dump here. I mean, it's pulled back almost to its original breakout of roughly 102. So the logical place to consider either a long or take profit target is this 102 range, just based on that being a kind of a previous high range that hasn't been much tested as a new low yet. When we look at the side-by-side here with Bitcoin, it's pretty obvious it's outperforming Bitcoin. It had like a 7-8% pump last night, so that's pretty cool. We look at the open interest, we can recognize there's just a lot of support between 95 and 105. So I wouldn't expect SUI to pull back super significant. It's going to require Bitcoin to stall out and pull back below 80K. If we see 79K range for Bitcoin, I think SUI will probably fill some of those lower range gaps there. Liquidation long delta is tapering off, which is actually good for sustainability here. Not too over leveraged, and we can kind of see we're right in the middle of liquidation. So truth is, it could go either way, but we want to presume it's going to go up based on the simple fact that it broke its resistance and the market's kind of behaving sporadically right now. Once more, though, it doesn't make a ton of sense to take a trade on a weekend along on SUI this weekend, mostly just based on the simple fact that it's not really, I mean, it's already moved, right? The likelihood of it moving up higher from here is lower. So once more, as per usual, my rule of thumb for SUI is to kind of just wait it out and find the best opportunity, wait for that potential backtest first before considering a long. And if you're in a short right now, just turn on a trailing stop loss and let it drop. There's a good chance we do pull back here. But once more, if Bitcoin were to pump to 81,000, which is still a possibility, we might see another leg up here for SUI. Those are my thoughts, though. What are yours? Let me know. All right, folks, quick look here at XRP, just quickly double checking some of our criteria from yesterday, talking about the potential for the price to move higher and reject out likely in the 145 range. So far, we haven't seen that yet, so just be mindful. 145 is that logical area of resistance here based on just pretty obvious consistency there. Every time the price enters that range, it rejects out. Okay, so just know 145 is a close approximate for a resistance. If we look at the side-by-side though, XRP certainly outperformed Bitcoin yesterday. But keep in mind, most altcoins did too. And now we have this algorithmic selling activity here, which once again, market makers really love to, I don't want to use the word manipulate, but they have a tendency of trading this coin systematically, right? So we're just seeing that natural pullback here. Where's it going to go? Where's it going to stop? Let's see if we can find out, right? So take a look at the backend data. 140 is that area of support. So is 137 for open interest. Liquidation delta is still in the red, even though we saw that pump. There's also a lot of liquidation to the downside too. So the truth is, this information doesn't give us a ton of a ton of direction potential here. What I'm seeing though right now is this significant pullback followed by, or the significant pump followed by a significant pullback. It's a really common occurrence with this coin, just up and down, right? We see it happen time and time again. So for the most part, we can presume the price is going to pull back if Bitcoin does, and if the inverse occurs, Bitcoin pumps, we'll probably see a little bit of a recovery here from XRP. But I'm leaning more towards the price going down on the short term, or at least within the next 48 hours, based on the fact that I feel Bitcoin will probably do the same. Okay, we might see 81,000 for Bitcoin, and if that happens, then we may also see 145 for XRP. But my consideration right now is that if XRP, just say Bitcoin goes up and XRP goes sideways, that's an indication of wanting to sell, because the likelihood of Bitcoin going tremendously higher this weekend is low. And if XRP is underperforming, there's a good chance it'll significantly underperform when Bitcoin does too, right? So we're not, even though we saw that pump yesterday, I wouldn't buy into it. It doesn't make a ton of sense to want to kind of FOMO in right now, especially on a weekend. You should know better, right? Anyways, at least that's what I teach my community. If you want to learn more and become a better trader, cryptocash.tech is a site, link down below. Look forward to seeing you the next one. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.